Hey everybody, and welcome to Leia's Lair. Here's our discussion of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 7, Score. So this episode is mostly focused on Ludwig Göransson and how he created the music for The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm. And the music is so nice. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just so iconic. Like, even from the first episode, I feel I can remember just being like, wow, like, what is this soundtrack? And it's just something so different and unique. Mm-hmm. It just fit perfectly for The Mandalorian.
Totally.
I don't think he could have done a better job with this.
No. And so we kind of follow his journey making the score for the show. So he kind of starts out, he said he ordered a bunch of recorders to his house. Like, does anybody remember the recorder? Because I sure do.
Yeah, you learn to play the recorder in grade school.
Yeah.
It's like your first musical instrument. And he orders this wild, huge, thick, like...
It almost looks like the mix of like a saxophone, like, recorder.
Yeah, but that's the one that has like the main sound of like the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Yeah. So. And yeah, so he shows us how he comes up with some of like the most iconic songs in the show. Mm-hmm. And so he starts out with the recorders, and then he kind of shows us how he moved to the guitar and then to piano and to a bunch of other different instruments to put this score together.
Mm-hmm. Like, you can see he even has a wild setup of synthesizers, like physical synthesizers. Like, none of the stuff he did to create the Mandalorian soundtrack was done with computers. He did it strictly all by hand, and that's just something that's amazing. It's not really done these days. Most people always like to do any sort of music thing in front of the computer. Mm-hmm. So it's just really cool to see that he just like locked himself in his house for like a month and just played around with a bunch of instruments until he got what he got.
Yeah, and man, that wall of synthesizers was wild. There was literally probably like 20 or 30 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very complex stuff. And then Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni are heavily in this episode, and they explain how they wanted something slightly different for this story. They didn't want the original Star Wars movie. Mm-hmm. They just kind of discussed how it almost would feel like a shortcut. Like, yeah, they could use that music to get the buy-in of the fans and get that Star Wars feel across, but they just didn't want to do that. They wanted to create something slightly different, and they had to find that like fine line between like making it sound enough like Star Wars and be a little bit different, but not enough to like kind of...
It had to be like standalone at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think they said they wanted it to feel sort of like, I don't know what the word is, dystopian, I guess. Like, just like off and kind of like raw and like just very different from what we would expect from Star Wars, but also kind of the same, Mm-hmm. They also explain how they gave Ludwig free range to experiment with different music. They knew he was really good, so they didn't want to like restrict him to a certain type of music. So they're just like, you know what, make this music. And when he would come in and share it with them, they would give him some advice on it. But for the most part, he would just kind of do his own thing, and it turned out to be super cool. So
yeah, and it's funny because they're like, oh, he's like, you guys are so great. You're really encouraging and like kind of let me do my own thing. That was really helpful. And they're like, well, if we didn't like what you were doing, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So they were really impressed with his work, and I think it shows when we watch the show. And I'm just gonna say it now. I'm excited to see what sort of new sounds are gonna come out for Mandalorian 2. I know we're gonna get a lot of the original stuff, but you can expect some new stuff too. So that's gonna be cool.
I feel like even season 1, like, some of the music from the first season is already iconic, like, so if that's any indication of how season 2 is going to be or how the show is going to be for music, then I'm pretty excited as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can listen to the theme song anytime in our Baby Yoda Build-A-Bear. But yeah, so, and it was really cool because, even Ludwig himself explains, when they finally get everything ready and they go to the orchestra to record the score, how different it is, and just how like you can see the emotion in their eyes when they're just sitting there, listening to like these like 30 people just recording their music,
Best
and
musicians in the world.
just making it sound so epic. And it's a huge change because normally it's just Ludwig performing the songs
By himself.
by himself in his house. So
Yeah.
now he's got Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, super impressed with his sound, but even he's impressed with it because he's like, wow, like this whole orchestra is just
Playing
like,
my music.
yeah, and it just gives it such a nice feel.
There's just something about like classical music that's so nice just to hear it being played. Like any song played on in some classical form is always so nice.
Yeah. And I mean, we get to see that in the show. It's just, when you hear those iconic songs, it just fits the mood perfectly in any given episode. And he's even said it's basically like recording a score for almost like 3 feature films because, each episode is its own little story, like different characters, different environments, different everything. So, just to be able to have this music span across all of them. And I think he really hit the mark on this.
I also think it was pretty cool. They were talking about how he is almost lucky because he has the original Star Wars soundtrack to kind of look at and like base his music off of, whereas they talk about John Williams and how he literally had to just create this entire original soundtrack from like nothing. So
they even talk they talk about that, and they talk about George Lucas too, about they're trying to get their point across, and everyone knows Star Wars, so they they're taking it from a high level to trying to make it an even higher one, whereas George is having to take it from the ground up and explain to everyone, these are stormtroopers, and trying to buy everyone in. But you already have the buy-in now. But to get in a different direction, they still need to like find that fine line because they don't want to piss off Star Wars fans either.
Yeah. So overall, I really like this episode. It's probably been one of my favorite episodes of this show so far. I really think that the music of any sort of movie or show brings it to life, and just to see how the music in The Mandalorian was created was super interesting.
Very cool, because I think most of the episodes have been, about The Mandalorian, the behind the scenes, the creating, directing, all that stuff. And music is kind of its like own separate entity in a sense. And I think it was Dave Filoni who put it very nicely into words, or maybe it was Jon Favreau. He said, one thing that everyone can agree upon on Star Wars is the music is iconic and it works perfectly.
Everybody likes the music.
Yeah, some people like different trilogies or characters or whatever, but everyone loves the music. And this just goes to further show that is in fact true.
Yeah, absolutely. And there you have it. Thanks for watching, everyone. What did you think of this episode? Let us know down below in the comment section. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more great videos to come. We hope to see you all again in Leia's Lair.
You are not a Jedi yet.